Hi everybody, this is my secondary quarantine tank, and as much as I hate shooting these kind of videos, I think it's important to shoot them, and I always like to document my blunders and my mistakes. Hopefully we can all learn from each other's mistakes, and so I'm never shy about showing when I make a mistake, and I made a big one here. This is, again, my secondary quarantine tank. It's been up and running for quite a while. It's been months that it's been up and running. And I used to have 5 guppies in here who bred. I then had a bunch of fry. I've got 8 ember tetras in this tank. I've got a fair amount of living, growing plants. And it's been well established. I just never crossed my mind that I might have issues with any kind of ammonia or nitrogen cycle issues. So a few days ago, I brought home 8 of these little pearl gouramis that you can see in there. And plus you can also see those 2 Siamese algae eaters. There's actually 4 of them in the tank. So I brought 4 of the Siamese algae eaters home, and I brought 8 of those little pearl gouramis home, and in the meantime I'd already taken the guppies out of the tank except for the fry. There was just a bunch of little tiny fry in here, and so that's it. I never thought about it. I did not ever bother to consider the ammonia spike or whether I was going to get ammonia developing or what have you. And yesterday I noticed a dead pearl gourami, and at first I didn't pay too much attention to it. When you bring 8 pearl gourami home, it's not terribly unusual to have one of them die within a day or two of bringing them home. And so I took it out, flushed it, wasn't going to worry too much about it. But later in the day, I noticed a dead guppy on the bottom of the tank. Some of the fry that have gotten a little bit larger, one of them was dead and lying on the bottom of the tank. And so now I started scratching my head a little bit, but I still didn't do anything about it. I was just kind of aware that that's unusual. And a couple of hours later, I saw another dead pearl gourami in the tank. And at that point, I said, all right, something's going on here. Let's try to find out what. And so I did an ammonia test, and I found about 1 part per million. It wasn't really high, but it was still enough to kill fish. I take ammonia very seriously. 1 part per million, to me, is a lot of ammonia, especially in this tank. My pH is 7.6 in this tank, which makes the ammonia fairly toxic. Anything below neutral, and it's reasonably safe. The lower you get, the more acidic your water is, the safer the ammonia becomes. I'm not going to get into the chemistry behind that right now, but when you've got a pH of 7.6, it's getting pretty toxic, and by the time you get up to a pH of 8 or whatever, ammonia is very toxic. So 1 part per million was enough to start killing off guppies, and of course the pearl gouramis are much more sensitive than the guppies. Surprisingly, I didn't lose any of the ember tetras, but as I got in there and started doing the water changes, I noticed I had a couple of more dead gouramis in there, and then when I woke up this morning, there was another dead gourami in there. And when I pulled that dead gourami out, I noticed this little bit of white stuff you can see on the bottom. That actually is the remains of another gourami. There's little tiny ribs in there, and there's skin, and so that's the shell. That's the skin and ribs of a dead gourami that I'm assuming the snails just devoured in a matter of a day or so. So I'm not even going to worry about pulling that little bit out of there at the moment. I am going to be doing another water change here this afternoon, and now that I'm aware of what's going on, I'm not concerned about it. I can stay on top of it. I can do water changes and test for ammonia and whatnot, but out of the 8 gourami I put in here, I've only got 3 that are survived, and I'm sure they've taken damage. They're going to suffer from being exposed to that ammonia. So we're not even out of the woods. I might lose more of them, and even if they don't die in the near future, I've probably shortened their overall lifespan by exposing them to the ammonia like that. So complete, absolute 100% user error. That was my fault. I should have checked and been on top of that. That's the whole point of a quarantine tank. It's to monitor these fish when we get them, and I just made the carnal mistake of assuming and just making assumptions that this tank was cycled and everything was going to be fine. Those fish were really small. If I'd put a bunch of larger fish in there, I would have considered it. But they were all so small, I never thought that it was going to cause me any problem. But it did, and live and learn. I just lost 5 gourami and several guppies, because I did actually wind up pulling a few more dead guppies out of there over the course of a few water changes. And if you'll notice, I still do have plenty of guppies in here, but they're all swimming around the surface now. And that to me indicates that they probably suffered some gill damage, and as a result, they're basically acting as though they're not getting enough oxygen, and they're going to spend a lot of their time near the surface from now on because their gills have probably been injured. Maybe they might recover in time. They are still fairly young, but we'll have to wait and see. So there you go, everybody. Not a fun update. I hate doing videos like this, but as I said, I always give you the good, bad, and the indifferent. When I make mistakes, I always like to share that in hopes that I can help maybe prevent somebody else from making a similar mistake. So take these little fish seriously. They do add a considerable amount to your bio load. Now, I also stepped up how much I was feeding the tank once I started putting the gouramis in there, trying to fatten them up, make them look nice and good and healthy and bright and colored. And so my increase in the amount of food I was putting in there played just as much of a role as the, additional fish. So there you go, everybody. Make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss anything I got coming up. I am going to be getting some more gouramis to replace the ones that I just lost, but we will be taking a little better care of those. So make sure you're subscribed and you won't miss that or anything else. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'll see you real soon in the next one.